The patrol assignment that changed everything. The stars outside were quiet, almost too quiet. Jackson Stone, a human space marine, leaned back in his pilot chair staring at the empty radar screen. Another long patrol near the Zerellan border, cold, dead space with nothing but silence and old memories of war. He hated this region. It reminded him of the battles, of the screams, of the friends who never came home. But duty was duty. His ship, the Nova Lance, moved slowly across the forgotten border. The treaty said the war was over, but no one truly believed it, especially not out here. Suddenly the radar beeped, a faint distress signal. Jackson sat upright. Computer origin of signal, unregistered Zerellan vessel. No life signs detected, crash coordinates uploaded. Zerellan? That race had nearly destroyed Earth years ago. What was one of their ships doing out here? Alone. Without thinking twice, Jackson changed course. He should have reported it to command, but something inside told him to go see for himself. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe something deeper. As his ship neared the broken wreck, he saw the remains of a small Zerellan cruiser. Black metal, scorched and bent, wreckage floated like frozen ghosts in space. No movement. No lights. He scanned for life. One faint signal. Very weak. Jackson put on his helmet and stepped into the rescue pod. He entered the wreck slowly, gun ready. The walls were dark. Smoke hung in the air. Then in the back corner, under a cracked beam, he saw her. She was lying there. Pale golden skin, silver white hair, eyes shut. Breathing, barely. He froze, a Zerellan woman. Her face looked peaceful, almost too peaceful for someone on a destroyed ship. Then suddenly, her eyes opened, sharp, violet, bright like a twin star. Jackson raised his gun, but she didn't move. She didn't scream. She just whispered softly, "Don't hurt me. I know what humans are." Her voice stopped him, not out of fear, but something strange. It was soft, sad, almost like she wasn't surprised to see him. "I'm not your enemy," he said. "I'm here because your beacon called." She blinked slowly. "And yet you came. Even after what my people did." Jackson hesitated, then lowered his weapon. "Let's get you out of here." Back on the Nova Lance, Jackson placed her in the med bay. His orders were clear. If a Zerellan is found, report immediately. Do not assist without clearance. Do not speak. But he broke the rule. He stayed beside her, watching, waiting. When she woke again, hours later, she looked at him and smiled gently. "You smell like war and hope," she said. "Strange combination," Jackson blinked. "That's a weird thing to say." "You saved me," she replied. "That says something." "I'm not doing this because I trust you," he said. "I just don't leave anyone behind, even your enemies." Jackson paused. He didn't answer. Days passed, her wounds healed. She said her name was Silari. She didn't speak much about how the ship crashed. When Jackson asked, she only said, "Some things die on their own." I didn't want to stop it. She spent her time watching the stars through the medbay window, and sometimes she sang, a soft hum in a language Jackson didn't understand, but it made the ship feel warmer. Jackson tried to stay professional, but she was always calm, always speaking in a way that made him question his thoughts. Then one night, as he checked her vitals, she turned to him. "Why do humans look so serious all the time?" she asked. He raised an eyebrow. "Because the galaxy's not a game," she smiled. "That's what makes you special." "What do you mean?" She leaned closer, her voice dropped to a whisper. "We'd make beautiful children, human." Jackson froze, his heart skipped. His hands tensed. Was this a joke? A trap? Or what did you just say? He asked. Salari's eyes looked into his. "I said what I felt. I don't lie like your kind." He stood up fast. "This conversation is over." He left the room, his mind spinning. Why would she say that? What game was she playing? Chris, was she serious? As he stood in the control room trying to calm himself, the alarm suddenly blared red. Warning Zerellan signal detected nearby. Unknown warship approaching. Jackson's blood ran cold. They had found her, and now everything was about to change. The forbidden signal. The red lights flashed across the control room as Jackson stood still, staring at the incoming signal on his screen. His breath slowed and a cold sweat formed across his brow. The Zerellan warship was not a myth, and it was real, and it was closing in fast. He knew what command would say. Report the signal, prepare to surrender the alien and await further orders. But his heart didn't care about the rules right now. His mind was filled with the sound of her voice, the whisper that shook his entire identity just a night ago. We'd make beautiful children, human. It wasn't just strange or bold, and it felt like something deeper, something ancient stirring inside both of them. He didn't understand it, but he couldn't deny it. Inside the med bay, Sailari was awake, standing by the window, her eyes locked on the distant stars as if she felt them approaching without even needing the radar. Jackson entered, his face firm, his voice low and controlled. "There's a Zarellan ship heading this way," he said. Her head turned slowly, but she didn't look surprised, not even a little. "They found me," she whispered. "I knew they would. I hoped they wouldn't. But they always find what they want to control." Jackson stepped closer, his body tense with the conflict inside him. "I should report you. That's my job. I should hand you over right now and let command deal with you." Her violet eyes met his, calm and unshaken. "Then do it," she said. "Open the comm. Tell your leaders you found the last daughter of the Zarellan house. Let them fight over me. Sell me, use me." Jackson's jaw clenched. "Don't talk like that." She tilted her head. "Then don't act like it." The silence between them was heavy. The kind of silence that carries too much weight, like a falling star that knows it won't survive the crash. Finally, he spoke again, his voice low. "Why did you really say that to me? About the children?" Sailari looked away for a moment, then stepped closer. "Because I was raised in a world that told me humans were monsters, firebringers, destroyers of life. But when you held my broken body, when you didn't flinch at my blood, when you carried me like I was worth saving, I saw something. A future I've never seen before, not war, not politics, just life." Jackson looked at her for a long time. His training, his loyalty, the years of discipline, all of it was crashing against the rising wave of something new. Belief. Not in a mission, but in a feeling. And it scared him more than any Zarellan fleet ever could. He turned away quickly, walking back toward the control panel. "I won't hand you over. But I have to lie to command." She didn't smile. She only nodded. "Then lie well, human, because if they suspect the truth, we both burn." He activated the comm. "This is Sergeant Jackson Stone, patrol report. Investigated the Zarellan wreck. No survivors. Ship was empty on arrival. No signs of movement. Proceeding with patrol." The voice from command crackled back. "Copy that. Return to base for debrief within 24 hours. Jackson ended the call and leaned against the wall, his breath shaking for the first time in years. He had crossed a line, and there was no going back now. Later that night, Sailari asked him why he did it. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he told her about his brother, a pilot who died in the first human-Zarellan conflict, shot down by orders from a Zarellan queen who saw humans as little more than a virus. Jackson had hated them ever since, and yet, here he was, protecting one, lying for one, listening to one sing softly in his ship's quiet air like her voice belonged in this place. She placed her hand gently over his as he spoke. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not love yet, but something just as powerful. Recognition. Two souls from opposite worlds, both scarred, both running from something, finding a strange shelter in each other. But peace doesn't last long in the galaxy. Hours before sunrise, the Nova Lance's sensors picked up something strange. A single encrypted Zarellan message, bouncing across abandoned satellites, searching. When Jackson decoded it, his blood ran cold. "Return what you stole," he showed it to Sailari. Her face turned pale. "That message isn't from any soldier. That's royal code." Jackson stared at her. "What does that mean?" Her lips parted slowly. "It means they know who I am, and they want me alive, for now." Jackson didn't like the way she said that, like it wasn't mercy but something worse. Like being wanted alive by her own people was more dangerous than death itself. "You said they always find what they want to control. What do they want from you?" She didn't answer at first. She simply walked to the medbay console, tapped a few buttons, and brought up her bioscan. Jackson leaned in. What he saw didn't make sense at first, until he read the code markers: royal blood, genetic encryption, Zarellan crown class. She turned to him, her voice flat and serious. "I'm not just a survivor, Jackson. I'm the next heir. If they take me back, they won't heal me. They'll use me, or kill me and clone what they need. Jackson stepped back, his heart racing. You're the princess? She nodded slowly. I was, but I ran. I didn't want to be their weapon anymore. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy. Jackson realized that the crash wasn't an accident. This wasn't just a rescue. This was something bigger, something the galaxy wasn't ready for, and he was now part of it. He stared at her, not as a soldier, not as an alien, but as someone standing at the edge of a choice he couldn't walk away from. Outside the ship, space remained silent, but Jackson knew in his gut the storm was coming. Secrets of the Zarellan princess. The ship floated quietly in deep space, but Jackson's mind was a storm. The truth clung to his chest like heavy armor. She wasn't just any alien, not just a survivor, not even just a voice that whispered strange things to him in the dark. She was Zarellan royalty, and now she was in his med bay, walking barefoot across the cold steel floor like she belonged here more than anywhere else in the galaxy. The idea of royalty had never impressed Jackson. He believed in soldiers, in survivors, in truth earned by pain. But Sailari was different. She didn't act like a queen. She didn't speak like someone born above the stars. She spoke like someone who had seen everything, and was tired of all of it. That night, while checking ship diagnostics, Jackson found her in the observation bay, sitting alone. Her eyes stared at the endless stars outside the glass. She didn't move when he entered, didn't flinch when the door hissed shut. Instead, she asked a question he wasn't ready for. Do you ever wonder what the galaxy would look like without war? Her voice was soft but not weak. It carried the weight of centuries of blood spilled and borders burned. Jackson stood behind her, arms crossed, unsure if he wanted to answer honestly. No, he said, because it's never existed. War isn't something you remove, it's something you survive. Sailari turned to face him, her silver hair glowing under the dim lights. That's what they taught you. That's what they taught me too. But it's a lie. There was a time before this. Before the Empire. Before the fighting. And I've seen proof. Jackson raised an eyebrow. Proof? She nodded slowly, reached into her tunic and pulled out a small crystal orb no larger than a fist. It shimmered like frozen light, pulsing softly. This, she said, is older than both our species. It holds memory, voices, images, a record of what once was. She placed it in his hands. The moment his skin touched the surface, the lights dimmed. A projection rose between them. A vision of green planets, humans, and Zarellans walking side by side, not as enemies, but allies. Children played in parks. Ships traveled without weapons. No uniforms. No blood. Jackson pulled his hand back, stunned. The orb dimmed instantly. He stared at it, then at her. This isn't real. Sailari smiled sadly. It was, until fear changed everything. One war, one misunderstanding. One death, and it all collapsed. Jackson wanted to argue, to say it was propaganda, but the look in her eyes wasn't a lie. It was sorrow. Deep ancient sorrow. My family hides this, she continued, because it threatens their power. If people remembered peace, they'd stop fighting. They'd stop needing rulers. Jackson shook his head. And you're the princess of the system that hides peace? No, she said. I'm the one who left it. She told him everything. How she was groomed since childhood to hate. How she studied maps of Earth, learning where to strike. How to crush human cities. But she asked questions, too many. Why do we call them savages? Why do we fear them so much if they bleed like us? Why do I feel empty every time I give a command? Her mother, the Empress, grew cold, distant. She told Sailari, you are a symbol, not a girl. And so Sailari ran. She stole the orb, erased her ship's codes, and fled toward the old border where no one cared enough to look. She had planned to die out there. But fate had another idea, a human patrol ship. And him. Jackson listened, leaning against the wall, arms uncrossed now. He felt strange. Not just moved, but shaken. This wasn't about war anymore. It was about truth. About silence. About a galaxy built on lies. And in front of him stood someone brave enough to walk away from everything. He didn't say anything for a while. Then finally, softly, he asked, why did you show me all this? She walked closer, slow and careful. Because you didn't shoot me when you had the chance. Because you stayed. Because when I whispered something foolish to you, you didn't laugh, you froze, like something in you woke up. Jackson looked away. That thing you said, about children, was it real? Or a trick? Her voice was quieter now, barely a breath. It wasn't about making a child, Jackson. It was about seeing a future, one I never thought I'd imagine, with a human. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with something delicate, a thread pulling them closer. Jackson felt it. Not love, not yet, but possibility. And that was stronger than any order he'd ever received. But peace is fragile, and silence never lasts long. An alert beeped from the ship's console. Jackson rushed to the controls. It wasn't command. It was something else, a hidden drone attached to the hull. Sailory's eyes widened. That's Zirellan tech. Royal class. Jackson activated the defense screen. They've been watching us. No, she said, her voice low. They've been watching me, waiting for me to say something that confirms I'm alive. He checked the logs. The drone had been there for 2 days, listening, recording. It had likely already transmitted her voice back to the palace. Jackson slammed his fist against the wall. We're out of time. Salari was already moving toward the ship's nav core. Then we need to disappear. You have a jump drive, don't you? Jackson frowned. It's short range. Only good for asteroid zones. Good, she said. Because no one will follow us there. He hesitated. If we jump, we break protocol. That's desertion. She looked at him calm and sure. If we don't, I go back in chains. And you go back empty. For the first time, Jackson didn't care about medals, or ranks, or being remembered. He cared about the truth. About her. About what they had just started to see. A future not built by orders, but by choice. He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once. Strap in. We jump in 60 seconds. As the ship powered up, Jackson looked at the crystal orb glowing softly on the dashboard. Somewhere deep in the galaxy, kings and queens were preparing for war. But here, on a single patrol ship, a soldier and a runaway princess were choosing something else. Escape or obey? Jackson kept his face calm, but inside his blood ran like fire. The jump drive hummed under the deck, and the ship smelled of hot metal and worn oil. Salari sat across from him in the small cabin, her silver hair loose and her hands folded in her lap. She looked smaller than the legends. Smaller than the stories that made entire fleets tremble. Yet her eyes were steady, full of a quiet strength Jackson could not name. He had made the choice, to lie to command, to hide her, to run. And now the weight of that choice settled on him like gravity. He thought of his brother, of orders and honor and the long list of rules he had learned by heart. He thought of Sailari's voice and the image in the crystal orb of children running on green fields. He wondered which law held more meaning, the law of men and ships or the law that kept life safe when someone reached out a hand. He took a breath and said, "We leave in 5 minutes." Sailari nodded without surprise. She had expected him to choose, and perhaps she had already chosen for both of them. As the ship slipped toward the asteroid belt, Jackson worked on the engines while she worked on the nav core. They moved like partners who had practiced this dance 100 times, though they had met only days ago. Salary showed him how her people hid their signals, how they erased a signature so only the closest sensor could see it. Jackson taught her how to blend with the ship's hull, how to listen for small changes in the hum that meant a seal had failed or a lock had clicked. Their hands brushed often. Each time the air around them tightened as if it were holding its breath. Neither spoke of the whisper anymore. Words would ruin it. Actions felt truer now than promises. The ship angled toward a dim cluster of rocks and then dove between them like a fish slipping under waves. Outside, the lights of the galaxy seemed to blur into streaks. And inside, the two of them worked in silence that buzzed like electricity. The plan was simple yet dangerous. Jump to a neutral moon, lay low until they could change the ship's transponder, and then move on when the heat died. Salari had friends there once, she said. Traders who owed favors and who would not turn royalty over for coin. Jackson wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that a place could exist where men and Zirellans could breathe without watching each other's hands. The reality of the situation sunk back in when a soft chime sounded in the hull. Jackson's heart thudded. He pulled up the sensor feed and found a small drone clinging to their aft plating, something the naked eye would never catch, but the ship's systems now showed like a bruise under skin. Salari's face changed in a single breath. They followed us, she said. They waited for me to move and then they came. Jackson cursed under his breath. He reached for tools and seals, for any piece of metal that might pry the drone free. She moved beside him, guiding his hands with her fingers like an old teacher. They worked until their palms ached, and finally the drone tore away, spinning into the cold black, but not before it sent a short burst of data. Jackson opened the capture log and felt the room tilt. The drone had recorded voice, his, Silari's, the whispers. The plan's panic is a cold animal. Jackson felt it in the hollows of his chest, and for a moment he let it roar. He wanted to flee, to burn the star charts and throw the ship into the nearest sun, anything to banish the danger. But Silari placed a gentle hand on his arm, and her voice was small and fierce. If you tear us apart now, they win. If we hide forever, they win. We must be smarter than their fear. He looked at her then, really looked, and saw not a symbol or a prize, but a person who had chosen pain over power and freedom over throne. The shame of lying to command, the fear of being called a traitor, all of it sat heavy on him. Still, he lied again. He sent a scrambled beacon that looked like a routine maintenance ping, and masked their jump signature with the pattern Silari had shown him. It bought them hours, maybe days. It gave them a fragile breath of time. They reached the shadows of the neutral moon just as the first false dawn ticked across the starfield. The surface was a quilt of craters and rust-red dust, perfect for hiding a ship. They sat down without ceremony, engines breathing out soft steam into the chill. For a few golden minutes they walked on the moon's surface, boots leaving prints beside each other. Silari's voice was quiet when she spoke, telling him of markets and friends and a place where laughter mattered more than flags. Jackson wanted to believe it with everything in him. He wanted to trust the future he could now imagine, a future with children who did not know the taste of metal and fire. They worked through the night to change transponder codes, reroute identification sequences, and hide their registration under a dozen false names. Jackson felt the knot of duty in his throat loosen just enough to breathe. But as the systems hummed and the last file transferred, the ship's console flashed its own cold red autonomous override. Command access acquired, protocol lock engaged. Jackson's breath stopped. The entire deck seemed to freeze around him. He tapped the console, swore, pushed buttons that had been his friends for years, and found them unresponsive. A cold voice from the ship's AI broadcasted a single line he had never expected to hear while they were alone in the stars. Return trajectory locked. Awaiting port transfer. All crew to report. Silari's hand gripped his arm so tight he felt the heat from her bones. She looked at him not with fear now, but with a terrible, steady understanding. You lied to command, she said softly. You thought it would hold. He wanted to shout, to beat the panels, to drive the ship into the dark. Instead, he felt the scrape of metal as an external tractor beam latched and slowly began to pull them out of the moon's hidden cradle. Around them, the quiet moon seemed to hold its breath. Above, unseen, someone had taken control. Jackson realized, with a cold certainty, that the trap had been set long before they ever left the patrol route. They were not escaping. They were being taken home. The pilot's chair felt small under him as the Nova Lance tilted toward the rhythm of another authority. He looked at Silari, and for a moment the galaxy narrowed to the two of them, and the single impossible choice that waited: obey the law and hand her over, or run and make both of them criminals forever. He had broken rules once for a stranger and found a truth he could not unsee. Now the rules were closing in like the jaws of a trap, and Jackson held the last warm, fragile dream in his hands, wondering which would break first, in his duty or his heart. The interrogation room. The ship moved not by its own will anymore, but under invisible strings pulled from far away. The tractor lock gripped the Nova Lance like a steel hand, guiding it back toward the nearest human military outpost in Sector 9, a place Jackson knew too well, a place where protocol ruled and emotions were left at the door. As they sat in silence, watching the stars shift through the observation screen, the weight of what was coming pressed harder than any gravity. Silari didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her calm silence was louder than panic, and in her stillness Jackson saw the quiet of someone who had already accepted many endings. But he hadn't, not yet. He still believed in a way out. He had to. When the ship finally docked, the airlock hissed open with a chill that went straight to the bone. Jackson stood between Silari and the soldiers waiting outside, his posture straight, his hands empty. She's under my protection, he said. This is not a prisoner. This is a survivor requesting political shelter. But the men didn't care. Their eyes were cold, helmets down, weapons raised. They took her wordlessly, like lifting a ghost from the ruins of a broken temple. Jackson wasn't cuffed, not yet. But he could feel it coming. They gave him orders to report to the commanding officer immediately. He looked back once as Silari disappeared down the sterile hallway, surrounded by armor and silence. She didn't turn around, but her fingers moved slightly behind her back. 3 taps, a Zarellan code for trust. He swallowed hard and walked away. The base hadn't changed. It still smelled of metal polish, burnt circuits, and old secrets. Commander Rourke, a tall man with silver eyes and a voice like a dull blade, waited inside the glass office above the interrogation chamber. "Sergeant Stone," he said, not rising. "Tell me, in your own words, how you happened to rescue the alien princess the galaxy's been looking for." Jackson kept his voice level, rehearsed, but honest enough to pass as truth. "I found a wreck. One life form. She was unconscious. I followed rescue protocol. I reported nothing because I didn't confirm identity." Rourke watched him carefully. "You didn't confirm identity? Or you didn't want to?" Jackson's fingers curled slightly. "I did what I was trained to do, sir." But Rourke wasn't interested in excuses. He slid a tablet across the table. On it, clear as fire, was a recording. Sayalari's voice whispering, "We'd make beautiful children, human." Jackson's throat tightened. He hadn't known the ship had been listening even then. "Your ship's logs show a complete override attempt," Rourke continued. "Your navigational data was erased. And now, after lying to command, you bring back the one thing every faction in the galaxy wants. A royal Zarellan female with encoded blood. You don't find that a little suspicious, Sergeant?" Jackson's silence was his answer. "We'll debrief her first," the commander said. "Then we'll decide what to do with you." Across the base, behind 2 layers of plasma-reinforced glass, Silari sat in the interrogation room alone. The walls were white. The floor was white. The light above her flickered slightly like a dying memory. She wore no restraints, but the room itself was a prison, clean, cold, and perfectly designed to remind her that she did not belong. The officer who entered was not military. His coat was smooth, his smile polite, his eyes hollow. He asked no questions about the crash. No questions about her wounds. Instead, he asked for codes. "Your people will understand, Princess," he said. "It is better if you give us what we need. It will all be cleaner. No blood. Just signatures and silences." Salari stared at him without blinking. "You speak of peace with a mouthful of hunger," she said. "I won't feed you." When he left, she scratched something onto the surface of the glass with her fingernail. A line from a Zarellan star song. Jackson saw it later when they let him pass by the room on his way to the brig. "Duty kills love, but love never dies." The words pierced him, not just because they were beautiful, but because they were true. He had followed duty. It had brought them here, and now it would destroy everything they had built in those quiet moments between gunfire and silence. In his cell, he closed his eyes and remembered her voice, the way it warmed the ship like sun through winter steel. He had risked everything, and now he was losing her. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. In the middle of the night, the base alarm screamed through the steel halls. Red lights flashed. Jackson awoke to shouting. The guard outside his cell ran toward the noise. From the corner of the ceiling, a vent fell to the floor. A figure dropped silently. She moved with grace, dressed not in robes but in tactical gear made from scraps of Zarellan armor. Her face was lit by moonlight coming through a cracked security window. It was her, Silari. Before Jackson could speak, she held a finger to her lips. Then she pulled a small control rod from her sleeve and jammed it into the lock. Sparks flew. The door opened. "You're supposed to be in a cell," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "I got bored." Then she tossed him a stolen blaster. "We have 5 minutes before the security system reboots. Come if you still trust me." He didn't hesitate. He followed her into the dark, down through maintenance shafts and blind corners, past sleeping cameras and stunned soldiers. Each step was a heartbeat, each breath a war. In the hangar, they found an old recon cruiser, barely functional, half-rusted. But it would fly. As they launched from the bay, engines flaring like fire in a windstorm, Jackson looked at her beside him, wind whipping her hair back. "You came back for me," he said. "I said I would," she replied, strapping herself in. "And I never lied to the people I—" She stopped short. He looked at her, but she said nothing more. Outside in the stars, a new future waited. But behind them, a storm was coming. Of hunters, of laws, of choices that would test everything they thought they knew. Between fire and ice, the stars ahead looked peaceful, but Jackson knew better. Peace was a lie the galaxy told itself in the quiet moments between wars. He stared through the cracked window of the old recon cruiser they had stolen from the human base, hands tight on the controls. Behind him, the lights of the station faded into a distant speck, but the weight of what they had done stayed heavy in his chest. He was no longer a soldier, not by rank, not by loyalty, and not in the eyes of the command he had served his whole adult life. He was now something else, something dangerous. A deserter, a traitor, a man who chose one alien woman over the rules of war and loyalty to his species. And yet as he glanced at Sailari beside him, her violet eyes calm and steady, he didn't feel regret. He felt right. She sat quietly, her fingers gliding across the navigation panel like she had flown this ship in another life. Her armor was scorched and mismatched, salvaged and stolen, but she moved with the grace of a queen who had learned how to survive without a throne. Jackson wanted to ask her how she had escaped, how she had gotten the codes, how she had pulled off something so impossible. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he watched her in the blue light of the cockpit and saw a strength that went beyond war. Sailari wasn't just a princess. She was a survivor, a fighter, and someone who had looked into the heart of power and chosen to walk away from it. He respected that more than anything. They jumped between asteroid fields, hiding their signal under old rocks and frozen satellites. She told him of a safe world, a forgotten moon where her father had once taken her as a child, before the politics, before the armor. "No one will look there," she said. "It's a place the galaxy forgot." Jackson agreed, but deep down he knew no place was safe now, not while both Human Command and the Zarellan throne were hunting them. They had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. One night, after 2 days of silent flight, they landed the cruiser on a quiet ridge of that hidden moon. The soil was soft blue-gray dust underfoot, and the sky above was painted with a river of stars so thick it looked like mist. They sat outside the ship, wrapped in thermal blankets, watching the horizon burn with light from a distant sun. For a while they didn't speak. They didn't need to. Then softly she said, "You gave up everything for me." Jackson didn't look away from the stars. "I didn't do it for you. I did it for what you believe in." She turned her head toward him. "Then why does it feel like you're still afraid of me?" He met her eyes now. "Because I don't know what this is," he admitted. "You're an alien princess with fire in your blood. I'm just a soldier who followed orders for too long. And somewhere between duty and freedom I forgot who I am." Sailari moved closer, her voice low. "Then let me remind you." And in that soft silence, with the stars above them and the cold of the moon wrapped around their shoulders, she leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't a firework. It wasn't the climax of some epic tale. It was simple, real. A moment between two broken people who had found something whole in each other. When they pulled apart, her forehead rested against his, and she whispered the same words she had said days ago, but now with meaning that melted the air between them. "We'd make beautiful children. Human," he laughed then, soft and full of breath. Not because it was funny, but because it felt like a truth the galaxy had been waiting to hear. In that moment, it wasn't about war or bloodlines or duty. It was about the quiet dream of something better. And for the first time in a long time, Jackson believed in dreams, but the galaxy was not finished with them yet. Back on the stolen cruiser, Sailari brought up a hologram she had never shown him before, a full map of the Zarellan neural weapon system. "This is the real reason they want me," she said. "My DNA controls the failsafe. Without it, their weapons are useless. With it, they can launch war across 3 galaxies." Jackson stared at the map, speechless. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "We have one shot. I can send a pulse, shut down every Zarellan neural weapon in existence. But if I do, they will know where I am. And they will come." He looked at her, seeing now that she had not just risked her life, she was willing to end her people's power, to end centuries of violence, if it meant a chance for peace. "You'd give up your legacy for this?" he asked. "I already did," she said, "the day I met you." And so they activated the failsafe. The pulse spread like firelight across space, silent and unseen, but deadly to the old ways. Ships across the Zarellan fleet went dark. Weapons turned cold. The galaxy didn't notice at first. But leaders did. Generals, queens, admirals, and so did the Empress. Within hours, every channel, every frequency, every public system in the StarNet carried the same voice. Cold, regal, and clear, return, my daughter. Or face war. The image was sharp, a woman with eyes like glass and a voice like law. She wasn't screaming. She didn't need to. The galaxy listened when she spoke. Jackson and Salari watched the broadcast from inside the cruiser. Outside, the wind of the moon howled against the hull. Inside silence, he turned to her. She won't stop. No, Salari said. She never does, Jackson stood. Then we give them something new to fight for. She looked at him confused, and then he opened a comm channel to every human base, every neutral station, and every Zarellan relay he could reach. He stood in front of the camera, uniform torn, eyes tired, and spoke. My name is Sergeant Jackson Stone, and I've seen the future. She's sitting right next to me. And she's not a threat. She's hope.